alive, Ethan. It's great to see you, man. It's been, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks since we jumped on together. I'm glad you're doing well. It's good to see you.
12 years. Yeah, man. It's good to see you too. At long last. We've been sitting here. Tim's in a new spot. He's in Colorado, got a fancy map behind him. I can only assume this is the beginning of what the background art is going to be, because I mean, it's looking great, but you got the last place had like 20 things in the background. So
yeah, I don't know this map. I love geopolitical stuff. I've always thought it's really fascinating. And so this map was in my living room, and I spend way too much time just staring at maps, like trying to memorize the name of like straits and peninsulas and like weird tiny little pieces of the world that have like a big effect on things, you know. So since we moved, I'm in Denver now, where it was negative, check this, 11 degrees yesterday. Wow. And I don't know what else to do with it. So the map is in my office now.
We're worldly now. We're worldly. Yeah. You're elevating the podcast, man.
Yeah, trying.
It's like Peter Zion's background there. Yeah. You're the one American who can actually point to like Baffin Island on a map.
Yeah. But yeah, life is good. We got here. Everybody's safe. I love Denver. I've only been here for a week and I haven't even really gone anywhere. It's such a different vibe. There's a mountain right in front of me. And it's so cool.
Have you shared that view publicly anywhere yet? Like on Instagram or Twitter or anything? We should link out to it.
Well, I did a Facebook, or excuse me, an Instagram story about it this morning, because I live right near a giant lake. And so I went walking around the lake this morning in the freezing cold. Just, I don't know, because I've never been in negative 11 before. So I just wanted to see what it was like. And I got a little bit of a video of it, but no, not really, not publicly. It's too much of a landmark that I think people would be able to know where I live.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. All these crazy listeners out here stalking you.
Bunch of lunatics.
Well, it's great to see you, man. I'm really excited to do this. We've got a cool show lined up for people. We're going to do a couple of things. First of all, I've got somebody to shout out, so we'll talk about that. Then we're recording this on December 23rd. You will probably be hearing it a little closer to the new year. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about two different things. First of all, how Tim and I review our years. This is something that I nerd out on. I'm not sure if you do yet, but something tells me you're like a reflective person and you have something that happens around the end of the year. So we'll talk about that. And then we are stealing a page from our friends over at the Shit You Don't Learn in School podcast, Steph and Cal. They did this great end of year episode last year where they basically sat down and talked through a couple of review topics. And we wanted to take a crack at that as well. So we're going to do that. So without too much delay, like I said, I have one person I want to shout out. This is a guy named Spencer Scott. He runs a couple of SaaS companies, and one of them is called Loop. That's kind of like a specific VoIP thing. The other one, I got to find the name of it. I'll find it in a second. But I sat down to talk with him about our plans for Please DM Me. And just wanted to shout him out, say thanks for that, because he shared a whole bunch of great insights and he's like super enthusiastic about it. In fact, a couple of cool things he said. So first of all, a lot of his advice echoed some of the thoughts that we've had so far. Yeah. Specifically around keeping the powered by Please DM Me in the replies. He called that engineering based marketing because it's like built into the product. And he said that it's, you know, he thinks it's going to spread like crazy if we keep that in there at a certain product level. The other thing that we had talked about is a couple of middle range tiers for like price wise. And he had said that one thing that could be really interesting is like usage based pricing. That way somebody, you know, who's like a big influencer and gets a ton of inbound, it is automatically paying a different price than something that maybe somebody who's just starting out would pay, which I thought was really cool. I hadn't thought about that. But the thing that I think I was most excited about is here's this guy who runs multiple SaaS companies. He took one look at it. He goes, you can get this to 6 figures without changing any features. What? He says, yeah, that's what he said. And he says, He says, in
Huh.
fact, that's what I would encourage you to do, is like get it to 6 figures without changing
Without
anything.
changing anything.
Yep. And
That's
I
the
was like,
perfect advice for me to hear, because I was staring at it this morning, thinking of all the things I wanted to change.
oh yeah. Well,
Uh-huh.
that's kind of what he said. He's like, as soon as you dive into these things, like the number of things you could change is endless. And once you start really getting engaged with the user base, they're going to have a whole bunch of requests on their own too. So it's like, it's really important. What he was saying is like, you really need to know who your user base is, and that takes time. But he was looking at, he's like, you get this thing to 6 figures immediately with what he was just really excited immediately.
That's so
Obviously we
cool.
have to grow our reach, but he says it's got good bones basically. So
Good
shout out
bones.
to Drew for building something that's got good bones. Yeah. Shout out to Spencer. I'm going to find his company real quick because I
Please
want
do.
to mention it.
Yeah, please do.
But yeah, what were your thoughts on that? You were saying you were looking at it this morning.
I have no idea what I'm doing, basically. And we've laughed about this a couple of times, but I mean that strictly from a product level standpoint. It's built on Vercel, which is the hosting, and the database is built on a platform called Supabase.
Yep.
And like I literally have no idea what I'm looking at. And so when we get it live, we're at least going to have the different tiered pricings if we choose to do that, which I think we're pretty much on the same page with it, but that functionality will be definitely built into it. But yeah, and where we go from there, just hearing that advice, like don't change anything, just get this thing, this, I wouldn't even call it a minimum viable product. I would call it like a foundational product. Get that thing to 6 figures. And if you do that, then you'll have enough proof of concept, and you'll have enough user data to know like what the next upgrade should be. And so that's like, it's just exactly what I needed to hear.
I felt the same way, man. And I was so
Yeah.
excited that he was excited about it, because I think like you and I coming from outside the SaaS world, you know, kind of in new waters, right? We have no idea if what we're looking at has promise. We think it does.
Mm-hmm.
But to hear somebody who does this, at a pretty high level too, he's running 2 successful companies, just to have him sign off on it was like a little breath of relief. And then also I talked to him about some of the stuff that I was most afraid of. I'm like, I'm so scared we're going to get just like a huge server bill or a huge bill out of nowhere. And he's
Yeah.
like, don't worry about that. Like that doesn't really happen.
Cool.
X, Y, and Z has to change in order for, he was able to like help put some of my fears at ease. So I'm going to show you his company real quick. It's called Media and Co-Browse, and you will actually think that this is pretty rad. Oh, can I have screen share?
Screen share every time.
But as I'm doing this, the quick shout out for people is, if you're starting something new, go find people who've done it and talk to them first. It's a step that I always used to skip. I always used to try to like protect my ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's a huge waste of time. Just go talk to people. So this is it. This Media and Co-Browse is his company. It's really cool. This is, I think, the newer of the 2 SaaS companies that he's running right now. And you want to know why this is crazy? So this is like a customer support type tool that gives you full screen control of your customer's computer, including like, you can see everything they're doing. You can move the mouse. You can pop up and have like this video without signing up for anything. Like he could literally, if he was at his computer right now, he could just take over my browser without me even giving him permission. In fact, he used to try and sell it this way. And he was saying, he's like, yeah, we're learning how to sell this tool, because for certain people, you can just pop in and take over their computer. Other people, that scares the hell out of them.
Yeah,
So
that
it's
would
like,
freak me out.
yeah, exactly. So anyways, real cool dude. Great advice.
What was his
Thanks for
name
taking
one
the
more
time.
time?
Spencer Scott.
Thanks, Spencer.
Spencer
Appreciate
Scott.
you, bro.
All right, man. Let's get into this stuff about end of the year. This is like one of my favorite times of year. I'm kind of a nerd about end of year review. In fact, it is how I celebrate New Year's. This started a couple of years ago. I was like sick on New Year's or something, and so I ended up not going out, and I kind of developed this New Year review process. And I'll talk through it in a second, but I was just curious, do you have sort of the same thing? I have like a whole like process for reviewing the year. Do you do anything around this time of year? Or?
I don't have a big methodical process, but I have something that is very consistent. My end of the year review starts at the beginning of the year because every year on January 1st, I read Think and Grow Rich. And I've done it kind of since I got sober. Like it was a really impactful book in my life, but also like part of my spirituality. If you ever read the book, he calls the higher power like infinite intelligence. And it just really, really clicked with me. It was something that I could just vibe with and I got it, you know? Um, and so my end of the year review is basically a short reflection on the statement that I write to myself at the beginning of each year to see what I did. And then typically I write a blog post about it. If you go to my blog on timstoddart.com, you can see them for the past like 3 or 4 years. I haven't done it every year that I've read the book, at least the writing portion, but yeah, I almost for the last 4 years I've written a blog post about it and like really, really reflected on the lessons I've learned. But I don't have like a real methodical, in-depth process. It's just a reflection of my yearly statement that I do when I read Think and Grow Rich.
That's cool. I
Yeah,
had forgotten that you do that. You mentioned this a couple of times in different episodes that you read that book once a year.
yeah.
Do you able to read the whole thing in like one day? Or do you just like bang it out or?
No, I really don't. And the hard part is the organizational planning section because if you ever read it in the book, it's like fucking so boring to read. It's almost like outlines and like this is
Mhm.
exactly how you plan ahead and you make your plan. And I've really forced myself to read every single bullet point that he has in that section. But I'm really not like a very fast reader. I never
Nice.
have been. I really try to I used to be into the speed reading thing, and then one day I was like, "This is so stupid. Like, why would anybody try to read faster? It doesn't make any sense. I want to learn what I'm reading." And so I don't do that. I soak it in pretty deep.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm similar in that well, I don't speed read, but I really wish I could. Like, and not like speed reading like some guy who goes to a course, but I always have heard stories about people like Teddy Roosevelt who could just read like 3 or 4 books a day. In
Yeah, that's
fact,
crazy.
there's a funny story about him reading Pride and Prejudice while he was driving a bunch of bandits to jail, like across the desert. And like he chased these guys down because they stole his boat and rounded them up at gunpoint, drove them across the desert at gunpoint, reading Pride and Prejudice as he went. Like, I was like, man, I just wish I could absorb written material faster, but I don't. I don't.
What's
Uh,
your process?
yeah. So I have. I'll go through it in a second here. Basically, it starts with an email that I write to myself, and I have an email that I've written now every year for the last 4 years.
Cool.
And the reason that I do this, there's a couple of prompts in it, is that I think if you were to sum up the whole thing, it's like what I really get out of this is it's a chance to go back and remember a bunch of stuff from the year that I would otherwise forget. So if I was to ask, or if you were to ask me right now, like, how was your year? I'd be like, oh, it was great. Like, here are the 3 things that I accomplished. And pretty much all those things are things that I've accomplished in the last month or so. That recency bias.
Yeah.
There's so much. This is what I've learned from doing this over the course of the last few years. There's so much that you forget about. There's so much that you forget about every single year. So what I do is this. I open an email and then I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 8 prompts that I copy and paste into the email first thing before I do anything. So I'll copy and paste these things and here it is. Number 1 is major events, accomplishments, or undertakings. Number 2 is lessons learned. Number 3 is things I started but didn't continue. Number 4 is important relationships started or rekindled. 5 is books, movies, newsletters, or podcasts that had a big impact on me. And then the next 2 are sort of polar opposites of each other. They're like a Pareto analysis. So the first is the 20% of people, experiences, and activities that caused 80% of my happiness.
Mm.
And then the next is 20% of people, experiences, or activities that caused 80% of stress and bullshit. And then the last 2 are questions that I've learned to ask And then one that I think maybe this group will like is things I don't remember writing but are pure gold. and then so I copy and paste those in. And then all I do is I sit down and I go through like all the places where you kind of live your life through the year. And I just go all the way back to January and kind of skim through stuff and look for things that I maybe would come to mind immediately, or things that I maybe forgot about. And I just fill them in with bullets. So if I'm like to give people examples of what I go through my written journal. I go through my like digital journals. I'll go through my like Audible account, the podcast player that I use. I do like a quick scan of my bookshelf too, just kind of looking at, anything that might jump off there. Like, oh yeah, I forgot I got this thing. Netflix, Amazon account, my camera roll on my phone, calendar, my financial tracking app. And then I'll also scan my inbox. That's gotten a little bit harder though, as I get more and more emails. And last year's review. So I also pull up the email that I sent myself last year. But it's like, it sounds like a lot, but what it really is it's like you copy and paste the email. And then I just sit down with like my journal and kind of read through it and be like, oh, I forgot that this happened. Oh, I forgot that happened. And as I come across things that feel like they fall into these categories, I just put a bullet and like mark it down. And I don't know. I really I wanted to record this because I've always like I nerd out on this with friends and stuff, but I've never like written about it anywhere or shared it anywhere. But I really enjoy it. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And every single year, I'm always surprised by what I find in terms of like things I forgot about.
Who do you do it with? Do you have like a select group of friends that you do this with every year?
No, I actually think that would be a blast. But no, traditionally I've done it like I've just done it solo. So like it's not always on New Year's Eve because a lot of times I'm doing something that's more social then, but today's the 23rd. So this is kind of like the beginning of that holiday week, like no one's really doing anything. Work is super quiet. The nights are quiet. And so whenever I can kind of like steal time away, I'll do this. I'll sit in front of the fire and I'll just, like I only have 1 or 2 notebooks for the year. So I'll just start cruising through those in my spare time. And because it's an email, it's kind of always with me. So if I think of stuff, like I just go to the drafts and enter it in. But I think this would be a lot of fun to do with some friends.
I think we should try it.
Well, I think so too. Just not to bury the lead though. We planned to, are you talking about what we already planned? Or are you saying we should do it? We should do that as well.
Yeah. Let's take that email. We could put it in a Google form, or we can just like send it out to everybody. And who knows, maybe nobody will do it, but I bet Sean will do it. Let's like send it out and put it in the episode and see if anybody does it and sends it back to us.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah. Oh, I thought you meant like the next segment that we had planned. Like, oh, what an interesting idea. Maybe we should try
do
this
that together.
I was like, what's not? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I love that idea. So I've already got it in a Google Doc. I'm happy to copy and paste it over. We'll put it up on the site if people want it. What do you like? We could
you can make a copy of it, right? So if you go into the Google Docs, can you just make it?
Yeah.
There's a certain permission level. File, make a copy, and then you make a copy of your own and just send us the link on Twitter. Let's see if we come up with anything good.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, that's my process. So that's like my nerdy end of year thing. I really enjoy it. And again, the big thing there for me is I'm always surprised by what I find.
Totally.
So yeah, for anybody else out there, yeah, let us know. We'll put this up for anybody who likes this kind of stuff. And I would say if you've got your own process, let us know what that is, because this is for me, I've sort of stolen this from a few different minds. Like I think the first time I really thought about end of year review was probably a Tim Ferriss podcast or something like that. I know he's big on those. But speaking of reviews, that I think is a pretty good transition into the next phase. So we wanted to sit down and do this. Like I said at the top of the episode, we're taking a page from Steph and Cal over at what do they call it? Sidless, shit you don't learn in school podcast. last year they sat down and they recorded this great end of year episode, which was like they asked a bunch of questions. They both kind of went through it. So we're going to do our own version of this. And some of these questions we borrowed from them. Some of them are our own. I'm going to read the questions out up top and then we'll go through it. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Cool. Okay. So we got 5 like detail-ish questions. One is best and worst purchase of the year, best and worst investment of the year. What was the most important challenge you faced this year and what'd you learn? Favorite lesson you pulled from the podcast, and then what is one important thing you've changed your mind on this year? So those are the kind of where we'll spend the bulk of our time. And then there's a rapid fire session at the end. But with all that as preamble, dude, what were your best and worst purchases this year? How did 2022 treat you?
It was good. And you sent this to me a little while ago, and I've spent a good amount of time reflecting on it because, as you said, you forget all the little moments. I mean, when we first started this, I was in Miami, and I'm thinking back of that room that I would sit in every day with just my Surface open, going to the skateboard park across the street with my son. And now my kid's like walking around with 2 Hot Wheels cars in his hands at all time, so it's like it happens fast, but it happens slow. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. My best purchase, there is 2 of them. One is this desk. This stand-up desk is worth every single penny. And the other one is this chair that I'm sitting in. This ridiculously expensive. I think it was like $1,800. And that might sound pretentious to spend $1,800 on a chair, but it was the best money that I think I spent on like a physical item this year. So this stand-up desk is called Uplift, uplift.com. Total game changer for me. And then this ridiculously expensive ergonomic chair. When you go, I'll look underneath at the label because I actually don't know what the brand name of it is. But man, I can't even tell you how helpful this chair has been, especially post back surgery. And then not to mention just sitting in chairs all day is bad news anyway. And so standing up, doing squats in the middle of the workday, going down, sitting down, keep my legs moving, and having a chair that really, really helps with my posture. Best purchases I made all year by far.
Love that. Man, I love when you find something where you maybe spend like a little bit more than you were comfortable with, but it ends up being so worth it. Because there's a lot of stuff out there that's not,
Yeah.
Okay, for purchases, I got a couple as well. I decided to kind of break them out into 3 different categories, which is like expensive, a little less expensive.
Oh, damn. So you're like all in on this. You went for it.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, but this the reason is I had a hard time with this one because there's a couple things that I really like, but I also I had a hard time thinking of worst purchase. And so I decided to just go overboard on the best purchases. Okay. So starting with the expensive stuff, there's 2 things that I have loved having this year. The first is this Garmin watch. This is by far like the most expensive thing I've ever bought for fun, right? Like it's this was $1,000. And so to me, that's, more expensive than I think my phone, right? I don't usually buy myself electronics of any kind if I don't need them for work or something like that. So that was a big purchase. I waited for a long time and used a bunch of credit card points and stuff like that in order to get it. And I absolutely love it. I was
so cool.
Yeah, I could actually probably go back and look at the data. I'm not sure how many miles I've clocked with it, but I do a lot more trail running than I used to. I feel like I'm in touch more with my own states of training and physical rest and recuperation. Totally happy with it. I wouldn't change a thing. And it's amazing. I have never been happier with any purchase of an electronic. This thing stays charged for 16 days.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's a smartwatch. And I'm like, can we just please get the same battery in my goddamn phone? Why am I living next to a charger with my phone that's 3 times the size of this?
Right.
Give me a little bit more battery space. Okay, so that's one. The other, and it's also sort of fitness related, would be this is kind of a sneaky purchase, but I really like training with a weight vest, specifically trail running. And for anybody else out there who has looked into this, you'll see that like weight vests they're expensive. It's like $200 for one of these stupid fitness weight vests. So the sneaky purchase, and I've been so like, I just grin about this all year long, is a plate carrier, which is like what soldiers use to carry body armor instead
Yeah.
of a weight vest. It's the exact same thing. You can buy weights for it. It's usually a little bit less expensive, but there's two extra benefits, which is that a lot of these things come with like customizable pouches and pockets and stuff. So it's more useful than just some weight vest you're going to buy on Amazon. And if you live in a bad part of town, you could throw body armor in it. You know, it's like it is also body armor. So I really enjoyed training with that, and also feel like I got away with something, just like buying something
like
that
you
most
got
people.
one over on the man.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for you.
It's like, yeah. I'll show you rogue fitness. And then, okay, so a couple more real quick. A little bit less expensive on the scale because both of those are like hundreds, if not more than $1,000. One step down is these candles. Well, so these are from an internet buddy of mine named I don't know how you pronounce her name. Aditi. We'll link him up in the notes. But she makes these candles out of a certain type of wax. They smell amazing. I've gone through like 12 of them in my place because they just this is getting in the weeds. But whatever the type of wax is, it's got what they call like a really good throw, which means these things smell great without even having to light them. So my whole place smells great. Specifically, this is like a fresh brewed coffee one, which is amazing. And I spend money on these because I don't know, they just like they
make you happy.
Yeah, they improve my quality of life. I was pretty happy with these purchases. So we'll link up her shop in the show notes, but I was never like a candle person. And I still really am not, but I always have to have these on hand because I'm like, it just makes the place so much nicer. And then the last one, well, I have two more. I still and always will think that a notebook is like the best. It's probably the best, most important thing I buy from year to year.
Yeah.
Different notebooks. My favorite is this one. This is the Canson 180 sketchbook. It lies perfectly flat on every page. If you guys are notebook nerds, go get this thing on Amazon. It's hard to find because I don't think they're really like producing it at scale, but it's the best journal you're going to find. It's the best one. And then the last one is my YouTube premium subscription.
Oh,
best money I've spent all year.
So good. I feel like such a chump knowing that I was watching YouTube commercials for however long. Like, what was I doing? You know, like, why was I wasting my life away?
Yeah, exactly. Dude, Mike, I would love to see the stats too. Like, I'm sure my consumption went up like 5x, just not having to deal with commercials. Yeah. But I started using YouTube for everything. I use it for podcasts now. I use it for like TV. And I feel like pretty much everything. I don't watch like a lot of stupid shit on YouTube. I watch a lot of like analysts and, highbrow entertainment. So anyways, I get away with it, convincing myself that I'm learning something. I love it. I could never go back. Can never go back.
Me neither. I love it too. Those are really great ones. I skipped one though. Worst purchase for me was yourboulder.com. I wish I never bought the website. I think it's not that I think buying it was a bad purchase. It's just the timing of it. I was doing really well, succeeding in like basically a bunch of stuff. Everything I touch is great. And I bought this fucking website and then flipped the whole thing and just immediately destroyed it. And the reality is, like, even if destroying it was probably good luck, because it was kind of the thing I needed to be like, what am I doing? Like, I don't have time to work on this right now. Like, what am I doing? And if I didn't, maybe it would have just been another thing for me to focus on. But it is the first time ever, other than like that silly NFT story, which I told you that I lost a bunch of money on. But it's the first thing like ever that I spent money on, and just instantly it was like, oh, like pit in my stomach. Like, why did I do that? And it's a shame too, because when I talk about the local media space, I really mean it. Like, I think there's such an opportunity. If anybody like loves that website and you think you can do something with it, if anybody lives in a neighborhood and it's like a neighborhood that has a good community, you know, I totally love this idea. I just, I shouldn't have done it.
Just because of the time.
Yeah, I just, there's no reason for me to. I'm so excited about what we're doing. I'm so excited about my personal blog and my newsletter. Like, there's just no reason for me to. It was just, everything was going so good. I'm like I'm reading too many finance books about not keeping cash and like keeping everything flowing to make sure that you buy like income generating investments. And it's just a stupid thing that I did, and I wish I didn't do it.
Mm. Yeah, I had a hard time thinking about what the worst purchase was. And I think partly it's because I haven't reflected on it long enough. And I didn't want to do something lame like, oh, I really didn't like, whatever
Yeah.
this mouse pad that I got. I hate. But that doesn't seem like a helpful enough suggestion, you know. So I'm gonna keep thinking about that one. But you mentioned something that I think is a really good sort of like transition to the next question, which is that you're reading a lot of finance books, investing books. And the next question was best and worst investment of the year. So I know they're kind of similar, but like, how do you think about those two?
This is why I regret it so much, because I am 110% of the mindset of dollar cost averaging, passive investing over time. Nobody knows how to invest. Nobody. I just, there's that experiment, which everybody's heard a million times, but never gets old for me, where they took a group of chimps and had them throw darts against the wall on different stock tickers. And then they picked those stock tickers, and those tickers did better than I think like 70% of like the best hedge fund managers in the world. Nobody has a clue what they're doing. And so over time, consistently, since the birth of the American economy, dollar cost averaging into the S&P 500 has been the best thing to do. And ever since I started, I've increased my weekly amount. As of right now, I put $500 into the S&P 500 every Friday, no matter what. I don't think about it. It's all automated. It happens. It's my best investment always. And it's like, even right now, I go on Twitter and like the sky is falling down and people are like, no one has any idea how fucked we are. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is so natural. Just buy S&P, just buy index funds and stop talking about this stuff so much. And 20 years from now, you will be so far ahead of all of your investment buddies who like had the best stock, And so that's why that purchase of your Boulder was such a forehead slapper for me, because like I know better. And on the other side, continuing to dollar cost average into the S&P 500 is the best. And sometimes if I eat, like every once in a while, if I'm bored, I'll put some money into like real estate ETFs, or, some like really long real estate ETFs that I buy a bunch of. But either way, it's never like trying to pick the winning stock. It's just invest into the market because it's going to go up.
Yeah, it's hard to strike that balance, especially as a founder. Like, I think a lot of people, not in our audience, because a lot of people in our audience are entrepreneurial, but most people have an easier time differentiating between like what they would consider an investment, right? Because most people are not building companies, right? So it's like, you go to work, you earn your money, and then if you want to invest some of it, stock market's the way to go. Index funds, right? That's investing. For us, there's like an extra option, which is like you could invest money in a project and potentially make way more.
Yeah.
So did you end up, might be a little bit too much inside baseball, but when you bought your Boulder, did you ever dial down your S&P 500 investments in order to cover that? Okay. All right. Well, yeah, if that's the case, then I think That was smart, at least, because you didn't sacrifice the long term for the short term play.
Yeah.
Or like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I thought about your motor a lot. If there was a bad investment I made, I don't think so, because I'm so consistent with that. And I've read all of this stuff. Like I really have. I think markets are fascinating, but the more I study markets, the more I realize that no one has a clue what they're talking about. And like the best thing to do is just let the money do the work for you.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have kind of an interesting juxtaposition to this. Best investment. Well, I think when I look back at the year, the best investment that I've made has been, I think, in this podcast. People who've been listening for a long time know that so far, this is something that we just spend time and money on. We haven't really monetized this. So it was kind of cool to pick my head up today and be like, we're a year in.
Yeah.
We've sat down every single week for a year. I think this might be the most consistent creative project I've ever done.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And so I think it was either that, because I've found this really rewarding. It's a lot of fun. And I am fully convinced that it is either already paying off or going to pay off in the long run. But like, it's worth it. To me, this is worth it in and of itself, even if it never goes anywhere else. So that's been one thing. The other one, this is like a non-financial investment, because all my financial investments are just down this year.
Yeah, mine too. I'm so down.
Yeah. The other, but this, and this has been really life-changing for me, is the time that I've invested getting closer to my food. So we've talked before about the experience I had harvesting our Thanksgiving turkey this year. That was really interesting. I just spent 3 days on that same ranch over the last weekend hunting axis deer, and we didn't.
There's so many of them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are. Didn't kill anything, didn't shoot anything, didn't wound anything, but saw a lot of stuff and spent 3 days completely away from my screens. And that was really important. I think that was just, it was so good to, first of all, that was the first time I'd ever been hunting. And so I was learning a lot, but also there's something that a lot of hunters talk about, especially from our world, like people who were in tech first and then started getting into hunting. And they'll talk about how there's something like primordial or very natural about it that you like kind of wake up to while you're out there.
Yeah.
Like you intellectualize a lot of it when you're at your desk. But then when it's time to actually be out there and like looking across the landscape and stuff like that, there is something that you kind of settle into, which is just really nice to experience. It's basically the polar opposite of everything that we go through being kind of in the media space. So those 3 days, I think, were more relaxing and more regenerative than like 2 weeks vacation. And
it's so cool.
Yeah,
I always love to hear that people learn to build relationships with their food. I've been very lucky that that's been a part of my life for a long time, and it makes a big difference. Like and I'm going to use this word, even though it drives me crazy, you quite literally are the things that you eat. Like it's what you are made of. And so it's important. It's like spiritual, it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's all of the things. And so I love to hear that about you, man. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. Worst investment. This is gonna sound, you're not gonna like the way this sounds, but I'm gonna explain it. My worst investment was indexing via my 401k. Now, it's not because of the indexing. I agree with you that indexing is the best move, and I actually do that with my self-directed Roth IRA as well. The reason this was a bad investment is because here's what I realized like halfway through the year. So for people who don't know, I'm an employee. I'm an employee at HubSpot. We have a great 401k program. I maxed it out. But what I realized about halfway through the year was like, I have never been an employee anywhere more than like 1 to 2 years. And I really don't intend to be. Like when I look forward in my career, I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur, and maybe you drift in and out of companies, sure, but I never really planned to be any one place for a very long time. And so the realization for me was I need to be more thoughtful about what retirement planning looks like as somebody who plans to have a career that is a combination of self-owned companies and possibly being an employee at different places. Because right now I'm racking up 401ks. I have one other one from an old job. I have one from HubSpot now. Like they had to roll my hustle one into it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, there's got to be a better way than dealing with all these different accounts. So, and the other issue is that, and you'll probably fight me on this, but I'm like, I feel like I tied up a bunch of money in what I knew was going to be a shitty market. And maybe my future self, I'm sure my future self will thank me for that. Fine, whatever. But
I
sitting
wouldn't
here,
fight you on that.
you don't think so?
No, I I think the American view of retirement is very romanticized. And my plan is not at all to have a bunch of money that I get to save so that one day I can be at the point. It's that old like fisherman and the businessman story. Like my entire plan is to have cash flowing assets that make it so that I don't need a retirement fund. It's just the thing goes for me. Like
Damn.
wealthy people don't need retirement funds. They just have wealth. And so like that's what I need. you know.
Damn, dude. You just like changed my answer to question number 4 in terms of like best lesson pulled from the pod. Wealthy people don't need retirement funds. Holy shit. There you go, guys.
Yeah.
So how do you structure that? You have your, or let me ask you this. And again, feel free to say like, I don't want to answer that if you don't want to answer it, but how do you structure your indexing? Is that just in a normal,
Vanguard.
okay, so it's a taxable account. It's like a
Yeah, well,
normal
yeah.
investment
So
account.
I have a SEP IRA and it goes from my business account directly deposited into my brokerage account in my Vanguard account and then instantly goes into the S&P 500. And that's
Got
it.
it.
I don't have anything more fancy than that. And I really don't plan to. Like I've done the math. Everybody can be a millionaire if they start investing into the index fund, especially if you're early, because that compounding really, really kicks in later on. And
Especially
so,
now.
yeah, totally. And so that's my plan with that. But like, I know that Guy Kawasaki is like such a laughing stock now because of the ridiculous shit that he says on Twitter, but Rich Dad Poor Dad totally changed the game for me. It totally changed the game. As soon as I learned that an asset is something that puts money in your bank account and a liability is something that takes money out of your bank account, all of the bullshit that banks and financial lessons and retirement planners give you in those folders, none of it makes any sense. Like if you have a mortgage, it's not an asset, it's a liability. It takes money out of your pocket. If you have a mortgage that has a rental, now it's an asset. Your car is not an asset, even though you can list it as an asset on a balance sheet. Like your jewelry is not assets, those are all liabilities. And so as soon as I read that, I was like, all I have to do is get as many things as possible that put money in my bank account. And like that's all I planned for. It's really that simple for me.
That's awesome. So you said you said you use a SEP IRA. Do you happen to know what like the income limits on that are? Because I feel like I stepped in it like this year as I filed taxes. I figured out that I don't think I'm allowed to use a Roth IRA anymore. I think I'm like
No, you
just
can't.
over. Yeah,
The
you can't.
IRA
You
maxes
said
out. The IRA is very low. It's 6,000. And so the IRA, I put $6,000 into my IRA January 1st of every year. That happens
okay.
automatically. I max it out the first of the year. But like my brokerage account is just a straight up, it's just a standard investing account. It's like a fund of money that I use to to go into the market. But like the fund is always basically at zero, because as soon as money goes from my bank account into the fund, it automatically goes into the market. You just need like a middle ground. You need to actually put money into Vanguard to invest it. You can't just invest from your bank account.
Interesting. Okay, well, people, none of this is financial advice, but
yeah, also don't listen to me. I have no idea what I'm doing, and talk to a professional.
I had heard, as long as we're definitely not giving financial advice, there's a guy on Twitter who was talking about, there's some like interesting, what does he call it? It's like a backdoor IRA or something like that, where if you run a particular type of business, and I think it's like you're the only employee of your business or something like that, the limit on contribution goes way up, like substantially up. But I have no idea exactly how it's structured. There's people out there who know way more than this. But the thing for me was just realizing, like, why am I taking conventional advice on, or just conventional retirement vehicles, if I know that I'm not planning a conventional career?
Exactly.
I need to be a little bit more thoughtful about that. So this year I'm going to reconsider the way the money flows through the accounts, and
stack
definitely
assets,
still,
bro.
What's that?
The stack assets.
Stack assets. Yeah.
That's it.
I want to try and max out the tax, advantages that I have, but
yeah,
I really feel like I'm in a position where a lot of that capital is going to be put to better use somewhere else. So I don't know. I'm torn on that one. But anyways, that was my worst investment, was tying up thousands of dollars in a tax deferred account related to a single employer that I can't touch for a long time. Cool. I'm not sure that was a great move, but I don't know. We'll see. All right. Most important challenge you faced this year, and what did you learn?
I thought a lot about whether I wanted to talk about this or not. I haven't really shared this with anybody, but I've been getting sued for the entire year. And everybody who is in a legal case thinks that they're like the good guy. And so that's why I've been apprehensive to talk about this, just because I don't want to come across as that guy. But believe me when I tell you that this person is the biggest piece of shit you've ever heard of or seen in your entire life. And if I were the kind of guy that actually named him and told you to go Google like his arrest records and all the fraud and like the things that he's done to take money from old people, it's staggering how like awful this person is. And he's made a living really just going after people and hoping that they get scared and pay him off, basically. And I fought it. And it's been terrifying, man, absolutely terrifying. And I knew do you remember when I talked about that Jordan Peterson thing, when I looked in the belly of the whale, right? Yeah. And it was like the thing that you want most is where you always want, is where you're most scared to look. Like I've been bullied my entire life. And I had a speech impediment when I was a kid. And it was one of these moments where I was like, this is finally where I stand up to a bully. And, I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, even if I lose, at least I can tell my kid that you don't bully people and you don't get bullied. It's like just the one thing, like, don't ever be a bully, And, and I won, and it was really, really hard. And not only did I win, but he was such like an absolute piece of shit to the legal system that we filed a bunch of paperwork that basically said like this court case is so unjustified that that it's basically frauding the taxpayers, because you're taking up government resources to bring this ridiculous court case through the system. And we won that too. So now this guy owes me 60 grand. And I'm still down because like I've had to pay lawyer fees for the last year and a half or whatever. And so it's not like I won anything, but just like we talked about, I went into the belly of the whale and I came out being like that person that I was really, really seeking to be. And it was one of the best moments of my entire life. I really mean that. When I got the letter of the summary judgment And like I still have it with me. I brought it with me on the move. It's gonna go right here. It's always hung next to me on my wall. And I just, if I'm ever in a spot like, can I really do this? I look over at it and I'd be like, yeah. Even if I fail, at least I can like tell my son that I did the right thing. And that was really challenging, but that's what I learned.
Wow. Damn, dude. I had no idea. But congratulations and thanks for
Thank you.
sharing that. I think that's an incredible win.
It really
Um,
was.
yeah, and what an interesting way to think about it. I love how a lot of times, I mean, you mentioned what Jordan Peterson had said in terms of the thing that you want sort of like exists right next to the thing that you fear the most. But I've been thinking a lot about how often the things that like try you the most or that are like the
Yeah.
worst experiences are those are the most important ones too,
Always.
you know.
Hmm.
Well, congratulations, dude.
Thank you.
Mine is maybe similar just in the fact that it comes, yeah, from a trial, not a legal trial. This year was the hardest. Was the busiest I've ever been. I'm actually really dissatisfied with it. When I look back at this year, one of the reasons I'm going to have to go do this annual review is because I don't remember anything that happened this year. I remember being really, really overwhelmingly, completely, utterly, totally busy the
Yeah.
entire year. And I hated it. Now, the good side of this, and a lot of it I can't talk about because I can't talk about it publicly yet, but I'll be able to talk about it at some point. But there's a lot. I mean, it's, lots of different companies, lots of side projects, lots of public engagements, like just a lot of preparation and revision and editing and just a whole bunch of work. And the
Yeah.
good side of this is that my ability to manage complexity has gone up measurably. In fact, sometimes I have this like brain training app on my phone. It's called Peak, and I'm not very consistent with it, but every once in a while I'll play it for a few days in a row. I'll play like 20 minutes in the morning, and it's just little exercises for, that brain elasticity and stuff. Well, I had not played in like probably 6 months. And I sat down last week and I was like, I really just need a something to kick the day off. So I decided to train, and I thought I was going to be terrible. All of my scores went up. All of my scores are like way higher than they've ever been before. And people who've played these know what they are. It's like, like you have to tap different pictures, and it's testing your ability to like multitask, to remember things, to sort of hold opposing truths in your head, all this kind of stuff. All of my scores are up across the board. And so I'm like, well, that's interesting, because I thought I was going to totally tank. That's the good side of it. I think I've measurably improved in terms of my ability to like manage complexity. The downside, though, is I do not like who I am when I'm this busy.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And when I look back on the year, I'm really disappointed with where my priorities were. I think, like, I spend time up north with my family over the summer. I don't remember doing anything with them this year. I mean, I remember like 2 nights in the beginning of the summer when I was hanging out with friends and with this community around a lake where we would do bonfires and have drinks and that kind of thing. And then work set in for the summer, and it was just like burning and turning, and that was it. And I don't like that. I don't want that to be my life. So I haven't quite defined this yet, but it's like I will never be this busy again. I'm right at the end of offloading probably one of my biggest projects, and I'm never ever going back into this much work ever. I don't care. I'll go broke before I do that.
That's cool. I've been proud of all the stuff that you've been doing. I'm excited for you to be in a position where you can make this announcement, and I admire it. We've talked a lot about not buying into the hustle stuff and doing that. I also am totally realistic that to get ahead, and when I mean get ahead, like 90% of people are on baseline. And if you really want to succeed, hard work isn't going to be the thing that gets you there. Like you have to find leverage. And so like the decisions you make are very important. But getting that first pull, like that first pull up, that, you know, like in those movies where there's zombies, you know, and like there's the camera down and all the zombies are like reaching up at you, and there's that one person that could just pull himself up just in the nick of time as like the hands are trying to pull him back down. That initial pull is that like 2 years of grind, and very few people are willing to do that. I think that's why athletes, I always have respect for athletes, especially like wrestlers and like individual athletes who just show up by themselves. You know, I've always been really grateful for that experience in my life, because it just taught me how to, I mean, just like you said, you wake up early and you go to bed late knowing that you have to wake up early again, and you're like, how the hell am I doing this? And you just do it, and then eventually it ends and you're like, thank God I did that pull up and I pulled myself out of the masses, because now like you have an opportunity.
That's a great way of thinking about it. I think one of the reasons, and we'll get into this actually in a minute in terms of like what we've changed our mind on. One thing that it's taught me is the difference between hard work and leverage. I mean, you really put it well there a second ago. And I think if I'm dissatisfied with any of the outcomes, it's partially because all the busyness was really spent focused on the wrong thing. And like, if I kind of had to learn this the hard way, but it's like, if I had just spent a little bit more time focusing on, in my case, like building my audience,
Yeah.
a lot of the rest would have been easier.
Yeah.
So I have more on that in a little bit, but I really like the way you put that, like hard work versus leverage. And I agree. Sometimes you got to grind. And for me, aside from just being able to manage more complexity, there's another benefit, which is that being willing to do that has kept me from worrying much through this period of like financial uncertainty, right? Because it's like, and this has kind of been a strategy that I've used through multiple downturns, is like, and when the going gets tough, you just do everything. And then you don't, like, yeah, you have to worry about lack of sleep and shit, but you don't have to worry about not being able to put food on the table. So it's like, what do you want to worry about? Ultimately though, I could do a better job building leverage. And so that's one of my big focuses for next year.
Awesome.
Okay. So yeah, so that was one of my bigger lessons from the year, or that was like the main challenge. Something's going to change. That's all I can say.
Can't do it forever.
Yeah. Well, you know, like I could do it forever. I think that's the problem, is like, but just getting back to the original point was, I don't like who I am when I do it. Cause I don't like how I treat the people that I care about. I'm like, you know, short with people that I should have more patience with, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So no, I think next year is going to be much more about building leverage and just valuing my own time more, and my own like ability to drive value in some way other than through hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of hard work. Yeah. Which actually brings us to the next thing. So the next question is favorite lesson that you've pulled from the pod. And if you don't mind, I'll go first on this one, because this is something that I took from you. Okay. So you said this quote, this was probably close to 6 months ago now. And I swear to God, dude, I don't think there's been a single day where this has not haunted me. But it was a line you said where you said, rather than being helpful, be valuable. And when you said that, this was during a conversation. I can't even remember what this was about. This was about a piece that you wrote. I think it was something to do with how you run your agency. Yeah. But you'd said, like, rather than being helpful, be valuable. And I was like, oh my God, that grabbed me by the shirt, dude. And continues to come to mind for me. I think because I'm like, you know, I just admitted to being busy, which I would say is like me trying to be helpful. Yeah. So I took on a lot of helpful type work this year. But the solution for next year, I think, least to focus more on the value side of the equation. And the ways specifically that I'm doing that is I really want to ramp up what I'm going to call idea sharing next year. So I didn't even realize this until I was doing my review. Guess how many Twitter followers I added this year?
7,000.
No, I'm no 1,000.
Dude, you're lame.
Yeah.
Fucking lame, bro.
Yeah. Which to me means this. I did not really take audience growth seriously this year.
Yeah.
And that's shitty because I burnt a lot of mental energy on it. And so the big thing for next year is like, I am taking idea sharing to the next level. Maybe not on Twitter, but it's going to be like definitely on the podcast, definitely on my website, and then like whatever other channels I need to in order to build basically my email list and my ability to, what's the word I'm looking for? I really admire people that I know in the industry who are thought of as like talent, right? Like Sahil is a great example of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've had like light conversations with him back and forth. It's very clear talking to him that he starts from a place of like what his priorities are. He's very good about managing his time on the things that he wants to manage it with. And then everything else kind of finds room around what those priorities are.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons he's able to do that is because he is valuable, right? He's built a big, valuable audience. So more of that next year for me. I didn't really show up this year like a professional in that way. I'm proud of what we'd accomplished here on the podcast because that was very consistent and we have the data to show that actually did grow significantly. We 3x'd listenership on the podcast, which is cool. But in my personal life, more focused on that. So rather than being helpful, be valuable. That is my favorite lesson from the year. That was the one that has kept coming back to me. What about you?
I love this. And I'm thrilled to know that I was able to share some wisdom to you because you were a lesson that you told me was my favorite lesson from the pod. And it was very recent. And the lesson was all we got to do is tell better stories. And it came full circle to me because when I started Sober Nation, I didn't give a shit about technical marketing or like hacks or tactics or even strategy for that matter. I didn't give a shit about any of it. I woke up and I looked at the blank page and I thought to myself, what's the best story I can tell? I wasn't literally thinking that, but those were my intentions. And I've become skilled and I've become a little bit blinded by my skill. And I want this podcast to grow, obviously, or else I wouldn't spend time on it. I'm just that way. I'm only going to spend time on things that I think are going to have a benefit for me. And so I do what I always do. I look for techniques and I look for openings and I look for avenues and I look at the data and I think, man, where are people listening the most? Wow, like the first 20 minutes has the most listenership. How can we jam pack people to stretch that out to 30 or 40 minutes or the whole episode, right? And then it was like, just tell better stories, man. And it really, like, I remember exactly where I was. I was going for a walk. I was listening to Little People. He's like this really cool DJ. And you and I were texting back and forth for a while. And it's like, I don't care about any of that. Just tell better stories. And it for some reason, it just took all the pressure off. And ever since then, I've just been approaching this podcast with a real beginner mindset. And it's been a ton of fun.
That's awesome to hear, man. Yeah. I'm stoked to hear that too. Because that's something that I think ties in with my focus for next year as well. I think because when I look at people like Sahil and Sam and Sean and all these other creators that I really admire, I've been very fortunate to be close to some of them through work, and
that's cool.
They're amazing. And I'm very aware that I could do that. Like we could do that. We could be that. And anybody listening to this, by the way, can do it too. I think the biggest thing that separates those people from anybody else is something that you're probably going to like a lot, which is that concept of going pro.
Yeah.
It's the consistency. It's consistently shipping. I'm not even sure you really need to tell incredible stories in order to get there. Like, there are people who get there telling mediocre stories.
Totally.
It just happens to be that, like, the people that I'm mentioning are very, very good storytellers as well, which is why they also stand out. But that whole concept of going pro and really showing up in a legitimate, dedicated way, it is the lever to beat all levers.
Totally.
And if you look at, like, we've talked about him before on the show, Sahil, I've studied kind of like his rise. There was nothing extraordinary about his content in the beginning. In fact, he jokes about this on the MFM podcast that he did recently, where they're like, you were basically just like a nobody finance guy, right? Like, then you started tweeting and now you're like, that's the deal. A lot of the content was fine, but he showed up consistently. And I think that's a huge differentiator. And I think that's the thing to focus on. So storytelling and showing up consistently, the themes that we've talked about a million times here. I just constantly have to talk again because it's
you got to
something
remind yourself of it.
Yeah, you re-stoke. So how am I doing that? For me, I have 2 blocks on my calendar now every day. One is in the morning for writing, and then one is in the afternoon for writing. And I'm going to just take it week by week and try to just live by my calendar. Because if I can do that, like, everything should fit. I have plenty of time to do everything, but it's not enough to just have it on the calendar. You actually got to sit down and do it. So that's what I did as the kind of the first step commitment. What about you? What's like one important thing that you've changed your mind on this year? That's the big questions that we have. One important thing that you changed your mind on.
I changed my mind about Twitter. Twitter is so valuable. I mean, it's so silly. Like, every time I learn a new thing, I think I wish I was doing this all along, but then I backtrack it and I'm actually very fortunate. Like, I think I did it in the perfect order. The real like bam move that I wish I made is I wish I started taking email marketing seriously right from the very beginning. I think Sober Nation in particular would probably have like 200,000 email subscribers at this point if I did that. So that was a huge loss. And I'm grateful for my process. Like, I learned the long form stuff, and I still think that is the best foundation for any marketing. I mean, anything. It doesn't even matter. Sales, like any job ever in the world. If you can write about it, then you can learn about it. And if you can learn about it, you can teach it. And if you can teach it, you can execute it. So learning how to write long form is the best. However, I always just scoffed at social media because I hated the idea of putting my stuff out there on an entity that I didn't own. And I still talk about that, by the way. It's just the simple mind shift is like, I'm not going to let them use me. I'm going to use them. And so, like, once I started using Twitter and LinkedIn to grow my own stuff, I mean, night and day. And I probably could do it just by my blogging. Like, I know I could. That's just as effective in the long term. It's just the position I'm in now with the tools that are available to us and with my kids. Like, I couldn't do 2,500 word articles and a newsletter every week. And I put up a pretty good fight, man. And I haven't missed a Friday with my newsletter. I really haven't. And that's just like what it has to be. You know what I mean? Like, it's not possible, especially my son. This kid is a maniac. He's hysterical. But yeah, like, I'm on the ConvertKit sponsor network now. I do like 2,600 bucks a month in revenue from my newsletter. Yeah. And so it's like, it's insane. It's an extra like 30 something $1,000 to do a thing that I love doing. Writing my newsletter on Thursday night is just my favorite thing of the week. It fucking rocks. And it's all because I was just like, okay, I'm going to take Twitter and LinkedIn seriously. And it changed my life. It really did.
Wow. That's really cool. Yeah, it's cool to hear you.
I also, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I also changed my mind on America. there is so much stuff about America being this terrible place and in a terrible position, and it's all completely ridiculous. Like, yes, we can argue about the Fed and we can argue about interest rates and we can all scream and yell about inflation. There's nowhere else in the world that is a better place to live. There's nowhere else in the world that has made such progress as we've had. And it's like, when you say these things, people always talk about the negative. I'm like, I'm not saying that things are perfect. Of course not. But I read about this stuff a lot. And I was scared about America for a while. And I think that there's been changes which have settled things a little bit. But my parents, like my family immigrated here. I was at the bank the other day. And the one guy I was talking to, his mom immigrated from Nigeria. The banker immigrated from Mexico, and my family's immigrants from Scotland. And I was just like, this is the best place to be. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And so it's not that I changed my mind. I was just really starting to doubt it a little bit. And now it's like, no way, Team America, long term. I'm long on America all the way. America, fuck yeah.
It's funny that you went there because I wasn't going to, but I was trying to, but I'm glad that you did, because I was trying to figure out a way to say the same thing. Yeah. Here's where I was going with it. Our international listeners are going to hate this, but okay. So and maybe I'll couch this by saying the same is probably true about your country. Like whatever your country is, you probably hear the most shit about it. Right. Yeah. Like living in America, we hear so many people from all over the world who, but especially from here, like there's been a lot of unrest here over the last couple of years. And I was in a similar position. I was really, really down on the country. And the thing that I remember the most from this year, this is what I was trying to figure out how to say, was I remember when the war in Ukraine kicked off, and that really affected me. We didn't record that week. There was something
about it for a while before we recorded. We talked about it for almost an hour.
Yeah. And there was something about that. And I'm still not sure, because the question that we're answering here is like, what's one important thing you've changed your mind on this year? I'm still not sure what it was that I actually changed my mind on, but I see the world differently than I did before that. Because I remember being really affected by that invasion and thinking to myself, I remember being torn up for the Russian soldiers who were going into something that I didn't like. I remember thinking to myself, they've got no idea what they're getting into.
For sure.
And there is no good end to this.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I'd only heard like really one perspective on it, and it was those interviews that I forget who did them. Somebody interviewed Putin like 5 times over the course of several years, and I had heard his take on NATO expansion. And so from that limited perspective in the very beginning of the war, I remember thinking to myself, man, this is our fault. And now it just ends badly for everybody. And since then, I have absorbed a lot more points of view on what's going on. And I still won't pretend to really understand it fully. I don't think anybody really does. I think in the end, like it's no generation that fights a war ever really understands it completely. Yeah. But there have been some voices that have come out and just in support of the West in a way that I don't think existed before. And it's been refreshing, I think.
For sure.
It's always refreshing to hear. You know what it is, man? It gets old to hear you're the bad guy all the time. And so the one that I'm thinking of, and this is actually my answer for like favorite creator later on, is Peter Zion. So I don't know.
Me too.
He was yours?
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk about him in a second. Yeah, but like there's just more and more voices that are coming out saying like, yeah, we've got our flaws, but you also can't lose sight of the stuff that is going right in this country. And I think being a member of the media, which we're immersed in everything that is constantly going wrong.
Yeah.
That's a difficult position to be in too. So I'm rambling a lot here, but I'm glad that you went there because I also had a change of heart in terms of like the state of the country, the future prospect of the country, and the role that we play in geopolitics, which I think is a lot more nuanced than typically gets credit. But it's certainly not as villainous as like it's good and bad. There's good and bad things that America does, but I like to see some of the stands that we've taken over the course of the year. And it's not just America; we've got a lot of allies as well. But I've been very refreshed on the state of the country. I think I'm much more optimistic than I was this time last year.
Yeah. What I've learned, to summarize, is that the messiness is the process working. And I think we see the messiness as like things are out of control, but this actually is effective
Democracy.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be linear. If it was linear, that means that somebody would be in charge, whereas like we're in charge. And I think it's beautiful.
Once again, coming in here and clarifying like perfectly what I was trying to get at. So that brings us into this section where we have some like rapid fire questions.
Let's blow through these two. I'm leaving my wife hanging on my kids.
Favorite read, favorite new creator. Why don't you just pick one? So there were
no. Let's go through them all. Let's go through them all.
Oh, okay. Okay. Favorite read.
Dune.
All right. Quick. Why?
Oh, it's incredible. Absolutely. Well, two really. American Gods was stunning. It was one of the most stunning books I've ever read. Dune is the imagination you have to invent a world with languages. I mean, I cannot believe that somebody actually created this book. Really, it's so cool. It's so freaking cool. So I would say the two of them. American Gods was absolutely incredible because of just how Gaiman is able to take such cool observations in society and turn them into such abstract stories. And like he makes points without making the point, and I really love that. But man, Dune is like, I just cannot freaking believe that somebody made this. It's wild.
That's pretty cool. I've never read it, so maybe I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Mine was Mornings on Horseback. That's the biography of young Teddy Roosevelt.
Cool.
And I like it for two reasons. One, it's a great example of exactly what you're talking about. If you think this country is crumbling, go back and read about our old politics. Everything is exactly like it's always been. It's crazy and chaotic, but this is what it's always been. The second reason I really like it is if you're busy, read about Teddy Roosevelt. Like when you're busy, read about Teddy Roosevelt. He will help you accomplish more when you think you're overwhelmed than you probably ever thought you could. So Mornings on Horseback. It's the story of young Teddy Roosevelt. The other one other really good one, if you end up liking that, is the rise of Teddy Roosevelt, or the rise of Theodore Roosevelt. It's another good biography. All right. Favorite creator.
Peter Zion.
Same. Why?
Yeah. A little bit how we talked about before. He doesn't do anything fancy. He records a 5-minute video every morning from, like, some of them are ridiculous shots. They look terrible, but he's so insightful. And I mean, one, he's just ridiculously intelligent. His memorization, especially like names and locations and like manufacturing plants and cities and like what shipping yards and all the cities, his memory is pretty photographic. And so I think that does well for him in terms of like reporting what his interests are. But the way he delivers it is fun and articulate, and I look forward to it every morning. I haven't had that in a long time, where like as soon as I see it in the morning, not since Casey Neistat really, where like I would see a new issue and be like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, let me sit for 5 minutes and watch this. And so it's been fun to have that again.
Totally. I feel similarly. The two things that I like about him are his ability to do research. So for people who don't know him, he's a what do they call it? Geopolitical strategist.
Yeah.
And his take on the state of the world and the future of the world is pretty counterintuitive to what you hear a lot of people talking about. The difference, though, is that it's rooted in a lot of very interesting data that people don't usually go digging for.
Exactly.
So I admire his research skill, and I think he's got a fun personality. So like,
Yeah,
even
he's
though
just a
he's
funny, goofy dude. It's cool.
yeah, yeah, he could talk about anything. And what I find myself thinking as I'm listening to his books is like, I just like, first of all, I just want to hang out with him.
Mhm.
But second, I wish he did other stuff, because he's kind of got his thing, which is cool. But I just want to like absorb more stuff from him. So like, I wish
Yeah.
I wish he had his own podcast where he was interviewing other people just to hear him engage with more ideas, because he's like really kind of quirky. Favorite thing you wrote?
The 5 personality traits of the ultra successful. I loved it. I loved learning about it. And writers know that you're usually like somewhat dissatisfied with what you wrote. When I wrote this and when I published it, I said to myself, like, that is good. That is really, really good.
Nice.
And yeah, and it was good. It was mostly about conscientiousness and the strange personality, almost disorder that you need to make the right decision. So conscientiousness can be broken down. I loved learning about this. I really did. It's organization, diligence, prudence, perfectionism, and industriousness. And so all 5 of those like sub personality traits of conscientiousness are really, really interesting. And I just loved it. I was proud of it. I was proud to publish it. I don't even know how many people read it, but the ones that did, I know they learned something from it. And I've taken this with me for the year.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I remember you hollering at me when that piece first went live. And didn't it end up being one of your more popular
It
pieces?
was, yeah, it
Yeah,
really was.
I'll have to take a look. That sounds really cool. My favorite, this is my favorite story of the year. The writing was okay, but I covered it in a couple of different ways. Here on Trends, elsewhere, was the story of meh.com.
Mm,
That was my favorite find. And I wrote a piece on that for Trends, and I really enjoyed it. It was like one of the more upbeat, sort of like, there was a lot of voice in it.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And there was one other one too. It wasn't a story, but it was like, I wrote this one email, and Sam Parr was reading it, and he's like, this is a 10 out of 10. And as soon as he said that, I was like,
Oh, that's
that
great.
was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Cause
know that like you appreciate his viewpoint, and so that must have felt really good.
yeah, I think he taught me more about copywriting than like pretty much anybody. So that was a cool vote of confidence. All right. One prediction for the next year.
My prediction is twofold, and they're both about health, and they're both mostly about men. And it is that sperm fertility clinics and stem cell clinics are going to blow up. They're going to totally explode.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, because there's too much plastic, there's too much pollution, and men's testosterone rates are completely plummeting
Hmm.
for a whole lot of reasons that have to do with modern living of men. And so Ben, our buddy Ben, posted this article about the plummeting rates of sperm in men. But I actually have been interested in that for a little while, just because of Stasi. Like, I'm always looking for different healthcare industries that we can branch into, and so I've been looking at that. And years ago, when I was trying to build Stem Cell Authority, I met a woman who built a website called Fertility Authority. That's why it's called Stem Cell Authority, because this woman built Fertility Authority. She has since sold it to a public company. I forget what it's called, but I remember thinking, like, it was all for women, by the way. I was like freezing embryos and helping women who couldn't conceive. And I mean, God, she made so much money. And not only that, it was one of those everybody wins, where like the video testimonials from mothers who had been having miscarriages, or whatever the case may be, and finally had a baby. Like, once you have a kid, it's really powerful. It just always stuck with me. And at the time, I remember thinking like, why doesn't this exist for men? Because it's like probably a simpler process just anatomically to deal with a man than to deal with a woman. And I didn't think much of it. This was years ago, but I started researching it. I stumbled across, I should say, at the beginning of the year, mostly with the dropping in male testosterone. And then through learning about that, learned about the dropping in sperm cells in men. And it's a problem. Like it's a serious thing. And men are going to struggle, and they're going to need help. And that is an industry that I think is going to absolutely thrive. And with stem cells have slowly been thriving elsewhere in the world. America has just much more stronger restrictions with the FDA, but they're getting there. And when the world gets turned on to stem cells, it's the reason why I think sperm cells is more of a rocket ship than stem cells is because of CRISPR. Like CRISPR will make stem cells basically be like completely obsolete. And so like if that happens really, really fast, then no one's even going to care about stem cells. They're just going to build new arms, you know? And
Damn.
so like, yeah, that's pretty wild. So I'll limit it. I went on a little bit of like a high horse spiel there, but I think like sperm clinics for men and men fertility clinics is going to be huge next year.
That's interesting. I agree with you. This is definitely a topic that you're hearing more and more about these days.
Yeah,
I get worried about it because just the history of like pharmaceuticals and stuff, and pretty much every problem that there's a pharmaceutical like solution for ends up being overprescribed. So like right now in our world as guys, it's like exogenous testosterone, or what do they call that? Like injectable testosterone,
yeah,
the testosterone supplements or whatever. And I think that is useful in certain cases for certain people with certain goals. But I also think there's a lot that can be achieved with just diet. And like,
for sure.
I
That's why I started eating organs. We were talking about food earlier, but it's exactly why I started eating organs. It's why I only drink out of this jug. I don't drink out of plastic bottles. Bunch of stuff, simple stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to do it. Like, I'll have to do a whole deeper dive on this. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. One experience I had recently was this ranch that I've been spending more and more time on. They raise bison there, and they slaughter the bison, and you can actually buy the meat straight off the ranch. And I had these bison ribeyes, and I mentioned how busy I was. There was like a couple of weeks ago, I remember I literally wrote in my journal, I'm like, I don't even remember what it's like not to be tired anymore. Like I'm so tired. And then that night, I cooked up one of these ribeyes and I ate it for dinner. And I slept like 4.5 hours that night. Woke up the next morning feeling fucking fantastic.
Amazing, right? Bison
Amazing.
meat's good.
Dude, I felt like my hands were warm for like the first time in a long, like I didn't even realize that my hands weren't warm anymore. But there's something about the food that is not cutting it in this country right now.
Totally.
And so I guess I'll tack on to your prediction with mine, which is I think regenerative agriculture is gonna come into the mainframe next year in a much bigger way by necessity, because a lot of the international sort of like infrastructure around like typical factory farming is going to be a lot harder next year. So I hadn't thought about that as the prediction. My actual prediction was a lot lamer. I was going to say I think next year is the year we hit 100,000 listeners on this show. But just to and how are we going to do it? We're going to do it with better stories, and we're going to do it with a cool ass piece of software that you guys can watch us build. So for everybody listening, thank you for going on this ride with us this year. This was cool.
Almost 2 hours too to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, well, hey,
amazing.
You guys deserve it. Thank you to everybody listening. This has been an incredible year. Hopefully this was helpful. We'll post the year-end review thing somewhere we'll say it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So if you want to do that, you can do that. You can let us know, holler at us, let us know how you guys and your years, what your predictions are for next year and what you're excited about too. Otherwise, we will see you in 2023. I think we're skipping. Are we skipping an episode? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Let's skip an episode, man. I think it's the holidays next week.
And
plus,
off.
we got some lined up.
Yeah.
So we won't have another one until 2023, but I feel great. this was like really great to just sit and talk with you about this stuff. So I'm excited. Thank you everyone for listening. Go to pleasedm.me and buy some stuff so me and Ethan don't starve to death. We need your money.
Yeah, just don't go there yet.
Yeah, just
Go
not yet.
there, but yeah. All right, people. We'll see you soon.